Welcome to the Evolution of Flight timeline presentation by the W Power team. This timeline will look at the engineering design process aspect of flight development, taking you from the BC era all the way to the present. Yes, I did say the BC era. You see, flight started its evolution before the 1700s, before we had technology to guide us. And let's take a look at that BC era. So in the 3500 BC, King Athena of Babylonia was featured on a coin, flying on an eagle's back. In 2500 BC, Akka, an Inca founder, was winged and could fly. In 1000 BC, the Chinese invented kites which carried men to scout troops. And between 1488 and 1514, Leonardo da Vinci made the first design of flying machines, using bird wings for models. All of these dates right here are crucial, very crucial in the development of flight. Without them, we wouldn't be where we are with aviation. This is the kite, the Chinese kites that we mentioned before. These kites were in fact used to scout troops of the army, troops of the military of the Chinese territory. So let's take a look at the 1700s. On June 4th, 1783, the balloon of the Montgolfier brothers becomes the first unmanned balloon flight. The balloon was propelled by burning a pile of moist wool and old shoes. On September 19th, we're still talking about the Montgolfier brothers, as they successfully attempt the second trial of their hot air balloon in Paris before King Louis XVI. This flight had passengers aboard, however. Not any regular passengers, but a rooster, a duck, and a sheep instead. Now, these animals were used to make sure that the hot air balloon was safe. And indeed it was, because on December 1st, 1783, Jacques-Alexandre César Charles dared to make the first solo flight in a hot air balloon. He flew over 36 kilometers at an altitude of 3,500 meters. As we move into the 1800s, we see that Sir George Cayley built and flew the world's first successful model glider in 1804. On May 6, 1896, Samuel P. Langley succeeded in launching the first reasonably large steam-powered model aircraft on flights of up to 3/4 of a mile over the Potomac River. On August 8, 1896, Otto Lilienthal died when a gust of wind threw his glider out of control. Now you may be asking yourself, why is this date so important? Well, it is important because Otto Lilienthal was a German pioneer of aviation. After his death, people just started around asking themselves, what next? What would happen next? And the Wright brothers happened next. Because as you see, on October 22nd, 1900, the Wright brothers made their first glider flight. In 1903, Orville Wright and his brother Wilbur made the first successful manned flight. A year later, they built their second machine. And on March 1st, 1904, the first scientific accounts of the Wright brothers' machine and successful flight appeared in A.I. Roots magazine, Gleanings in Bee Culture, and another article by Octave Chanute in Popular Science Monthly. On August 3rd, 1904, Captain Thomas S. Baldwin accomplished the first circuit flight in a navigation balloon in Oakland, California. On September 20th, the Wright brothers accomplished the first successful bank and complete circular flight in Dayton, Ohio. On November, the British government, through Colonel Capper, visited the Wright brothers in Dayton and indicated interest in their machine. So as you can notice right now, the 1900s was just overtaken with the Wright brothers, their inventions to evolve flight to how it is now. This in fact, was their first machine. So let's take a look at the 1910s. An important date right here is March 3rd, 1915, when the NACA was formed. The NACA stands for National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which is the first government-sponsored organization in support of aviation research and development. Another important date was November 6, 1915, when Lieutenant Commander H.C. Mustin made the first catapult launching from a vessel underway from the USS North Carolina in Pensacola Bay. This is the NACA logo. As we move into the 1920s, we notice that on January 1st, 1922, Underwriters Laboratories in Chicago began registration of American aircraft as a private enterprise for benefit of insurance companies. On March 20th, the USS Langley commissioned as an airplane carrier in Norfolk, Virginia. An important date here is June 12, 1922, when Captain A.W. Stevens of the U.S. Air Service made a record parachute jump from 24,206 feet from a supercharged Martin bomber over McCook Field, USA. As we take a look at the 1930s, we consider the 1930s as the era of the Great Depression. Well, this timeline suggests that instead of the Great Depression, it was more oriented around flight development. On April 19, 1932, the first Goddard rocket with gyroscopically controlled vanes for automatically stabilized flight was fired. And between May 20th and the 21st, Amelia Earhart, a woman we all know, became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. A national monument commemorating the Wright brothers' flight is dedicated in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on November 19, 1932. As we move into the 1940s, we start to evolve further with aviation. On January 5, 1949, Captain Charles E. Yeager set a new unofficial climbing speed record of more than 13,000 feet per minute in the Bell X-1 at Muroc. On February, the U.S. Air Force conducted a test of special 30-foot parachutes to act as brakes and shorten the landing of jet airplanes, using a Boeing XB-47 for the purpose. On March 2nd, Lucky Lady, a Boeing B-50A, made the first non-stop around-the-world flight. Another important date was July 27th, when the first flight of the prototype de Havilland Comet, a first commercial jet aircraft, took place. Let's move along to the 1950s now, where the Atlas rocket was the first liquid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of more than 5,000 miles was made in 1951. On June 1951, Charles F. Blair made the first single-engine plane flight across the North Pole in his F-51 Mustang. On that same month, Douglas Aircraft announced development of a supersonic missile that can be guided to an enemy plane and exploded upon contact. On December 10, 1951, the first flight of the Cayman 225 powered up by a Boeing 502 gas turbine engine took place. Now let's take a look at the 1960s. On July 26th, SYNCOM II, the world's first geosynchronous satellite, was launched. X-15, an experimental aircraft, set an altitude record of 354,200 feet with a speed of 4,159 miles an hour on August 22nd. March 19 was the day of Geraldine Mach, when she became the first woman to fly around the world in a Cessna 180. On April 11th, Jerry Mach became the first woman to pilot a plane around the world successfully. Another big date was May 4th, when Jacqueline Cochran established the official world speed record for women in a Lockheed F-104G starfighter with an average speed of 1,429 3/10 miles an hour. And this is a picture of that exact Lockheed F-104G starfighter. As we move back to the 1970s, we notice that on December 3rd, 1973, as we move into the 1970s, we notice that a crucial date is on December 3rd, 1973, when Pioneer 10 was the first flyby past Jupiter. Between May 25th and June 22nd, Skylab II was the first U.S. space station mission with Pete Conrad, Joe Kerwin, and Paul Witz. On May 14th, Skylab was an unmanned space station that was launched. December 13th, the big day, was when the last Apollo mission on the moon ended. As we now move into the 1980s, we see that on February 14th, Solar Maximum Mission was the first satellite to study the sun in detail. On November, Solar Challenger was the first solar-powered plane flown. And on November 11th, 1980, Voyager 1 flew past Saturn on a journey that carried it beyond the edge of the solar system. Double Eagle V, Double Eagle 5, was the first balloon flight over the Pacific Ocean in 1981. Now we glide into the 1990s, where in 1994, the test flight of Boeing 777 which was the first aircraft to be designed entirely on a computer. On January 3rd, 1999, the Mars Polar Lander was launched. And on March 20th, 1999, after a 46,759-mile balloon flight, which lasted 19 days, 21 hours, and 55 minutes, the Breitling Orbiter 3 balloon, flown by Brian Jones and Bertrand Piccard, achieved a non-stop round-the-world balloon flight. Let's move on into the 2000s. Now we're getting to the era we are all familiar with. October 14, 2003, China launched its first manned space station. On December 17th, the first manned supersonic flight by an aircraft developed by a small company's private non-government effort. This flight was the first powered flight of Spaceship One. And on December 2009, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner long-range mid-sized wide-body twin jet, largely constructed of carbon fiber material, made its first flight. Let's move in now to the 2010s and beyond. July 7th to the 8th, 2010, Bertrand Piccard and his Solar Impulse team made aviation history by flying more than 24 consecutive hours non-stop in a solar airplane. On July 8th, 2011, the final flight of Space Shuttle Atlantis and the final flight of the Space Shuttle program took place. On October 14, 2012, Felix Baumgartner, a daredevil, made the successful jump from the stratosphere. On May 22, 2013, Trident completes its first flight. The Northrop Grumman-built MQ-4C Triton high-altitude unmanned aircraft successfully completed its first flight. On that same day, the Solar Impulse set a distance record for a solar-powered flight of 18 hours. Here's a picture of that solar airplane. And of course, the Boeing. Thank you for viewing this presentation made by the W Power team.